Hi, I'm Tim Pittaway, and this is a video part of a series about transitional vulnerability. And so this video will be more about the meaning of vulnerability and how it actually changed over a period of time to what we know of it today. And I'll also highlighting the fact that it's not static, and in vulnerability, it's normally associated with dynamic systems. So vulnerability, it started off, well, let's say its origin in Latin is vulnus, meaning wound. And in a verb, it means to wound, hurt or injure. And vulnerabilis, wounding or able to be wounded, has evolved to vulnerability, capable of being wounded. So that's how the word is actually has developed. So vulnerability is fundamentally rooted in the physical capacity to sustain harm. And this is where we will work from this auspice. So 18th century usage expanded the concept from a bodily harm to a spatial and metaphorical exposure. So initially it was to harm or comes form of harming the body, but over time it has been used in more instances in places and positions, and now of late we more of exposure to emotional, social, economic harm. So it has not only changed in its term, but also how it is being applied. Um, so when we look at the 20th century risk and development studies, we find vulnerability as a systemic condition. So if we look at fixed individual weakness, we talk about bodily liability or injury or static trait, physical exposure. It has moved towards more of a systemic susceptibility, and the potential for loss driven by political, economic, and environmental structures. It's used in like climate change, for example, vulnerability in the change of rainfall, for example. We are now using the word in other areas as well. So contemporary psychological distinguishes the capacity to be wounded from the inability to withstand it. So yeah, we have a definition, and we're defining vulnerability compared to weakness. Vulnerability is the openness to emotional exposure or an uncertainty, the capability of being wounded. Vulnerability operates as a source of connection and strength in leadership and psychology, while weakness is the inability to withstand wounding, an entirely different psychological construct to vulnerability. So in classical research, we're looking at the shift has focused towards more processes and feedback loops and mitigation efforts. Right, so we're not only talking about the human and the physical vulnerability, but we are looking at greater processes in businesses, for example. We're measuring how inherently fragile a person is, but at the same time we can also say that vulnerability, that is a condition that's shaped by time and interventional and structural feedbacks, and how that is also influenced. And so we're going to be looking that there's going to be some references behind this video, and Turner is one of them, which you can do more reading about in this area. So the critical analytical question evolved from identity to temporality. So who is vulnerable? To our modern focus now is during which processes are we vulnerable? And at what dynamics do they become vulnerable, or do they increase their vulnerability, or does vulnerability compound? So transitional vulnerability crystallizes risk during the disruption of established arrangements. All right. So in this concept, we're looking at transitions themselves at moments when vulnerability is produced, redistributed, or temporarily intensified. All right, and the context is heightened by the risk and the challenges facing individuals, communities, or organization systems during the period of significant change. So this is where the core definition of transitional vulnerability comes from. The framework is structured around three interconnected dimensions: temporal, exposure, systemic susceptibility, and adaptation gaps. All right. So for risks that arise specifically in the interim space between more or stable states, or a latent weakness that only surfaces under intense pressure, or a dangerous mismatch between a rapid page or change and actual capacity to respond. Transitional vulnerability specifies that transition delivers the wound. So here's an interesting thing. The process of change itself acts as the wounding context. Vulnerability remains being open to that wounding. And the core idea of susceptibility to harm now is embedded in the layered and recursive systems interacting over multiple timelines and over a period of time during this change. And in conclusion, vulnerability is no longer a timeless attribute, but can be a metric of movement. The origin is capable of being wounded. The vulnerability spikes and mutates or relocates during the movement from one configure to another, and then it's anticipating adaptation, and hopefully we can build some resistance in this area, addressing systemic susceptibility and managing temporal exposure to safely navigate the wound of this change. So this is kind of a background to the understanding of vulnerability and how the definition of transitional vulnerability has come about.